so much for joining us today here on the Revival Center YouTube page. We call this The Influence, and we come live to you every Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. right here on this channel to bring you different topics, to teach about different things, current events, doctrine, theology, just various things. So thank you so much for joining us. Today I'm joined by Pastor Jason. Would you like to greet everyone?
Yeah, good morning everybody. Hope everybody is doing well on this cool Tuesday morning here in Central Alabama.
Absolutely, and if you are watching this live, again, Brother Aaron is behind the camera and on the computer, so if you like to jump on there and chat or send an email or a text message to him there on the chat screen on YouTube, we would love the interaction. If you haven't liked the video, like it real quick, subscribe to the channel. That is how the influence happens here in the TV world. So with that being said, today what we're going to talk about is some reports and different studies that have come out from 2025 and also in 2024 about the persecution that has taken place around the globe of those who call themselves Christian. Oftentimes we forget that in other parts of the world, if you claim to be a Christ follower, your life truly is in jeopardy, and you could lose literally everything simply because you name the name of Christ as your Lord and Savior. And on that note, obviously it hasn't, this isn't new. This goes all the way back to the first century church. This goes back to the apostles in the book of Acts as they were traveling around the Roman Empire sharing Jesus Christ. Every one of the apostles but one died a martyr's death. Every single one of them, except John. Now that doesn't mean that John didn't suffer persecution, for he did. He was exiled on an island of Patmos. He was boiled in oil, tradition says. I mean, all kinds of things happened to these guys. And here we are, 2,000 years later, and the number of people who have died and who have been martyred for their faith in the world exceeds that of the time of the apostles. And so it's astounding. And so one of the things that we're going to preference a lot of these numbers and teachings that we're about to give you, it's going to be very informationally driven this morning, is found in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse number 14 and 15. The reason I'm highlighting this is because it is still true today. Paul names a person who hindered the gospel being preached where he was at. Listen to these words. Alexander, the coppersmith, did me much harm. May the Lord repay him according to his works. You also, talking to Timothy, you also must be aware of him, for he has greatly resisted our words. So even back in these days of the Bible times, you had Alexander the coppersmith who greatly resisted the church, the work of the gospel, and the preaching of the gospel of Paul. And Paul told Timothy, you better watch him. And so in the same way, what we're saying today in this teaching is that antichrist spirit that Alexandria operated with is very much alive and well today. And there are factions, there is ideologies, there are governments, the way of thinking that certainly opposes the gospel message in every shape, form, and fashion. And I'm going to make a statement towards the end of this teaching. And it's not a political statement, but it is an observation of where the majority of the persecution is coming from. What is the teaching fueling it? Obviously, in the days of the book of Acts, it was coming from the Roman government. They worshiped the emperor. So if you did not worship the emperor, then you would be persecuted. So that's where a lot of the persecution was coming from. So you would be able to say it comes from the Roman government. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to be able to say the same thing in today, in 2026, of where the persecution is coming from. And all it is an observation of the facts. So as we kind of begin to move into this, some of these statistics are astounding as we sit here in the Revival Center YouTube studio talking about this, because this is actually taking place around the world. But every day, on average, that these organizations that keep track of this know about. Obviously, it was way more than this. This is just what they can confirm. But every day, an average of more than 12 Christians are killed for their faith. Every single day. And that's obviously a very conservative number, because you can't track all of this. That's one Christian every 2 hours are murdered because they follow Jesus. One Christian every 2 hours. Is somewhere in the world this is taking place, and this is a reality, all simply because they claim to follow Jesus Christ and His teachings in the gospel. So let's begin to move into this a little bit more. So Brother Jason is fixing to read something called Zones of Persecutions. Zone of Persecutions. And what this map does is it has highlighted where the majority of the persecution is taking place in the world. And what is astounding is the majority of these persecutions, as you're about to hear, comes from this northern section of Africa. It runs through the Middle East, right through Asia, like the China area. It's amazing how that little corridor in the world has such persecution. So, Brother Jason, why don't you begin to highlight some of these places?
Yeah, and this is from the International Christian Concern. It's a group that does all of the data, and but this is called the Global Persecution Index from 2024. There's a bunch of them, but I'm just going to highlight a few. The first one is Saudi Arabia. Christians are prohibited from praying and worshiping in public and constructing church buildings. And then within this teaching too, it goes, there's articles from within these countries' newspaper outlets or whatever that talk about specific events that happen to Christians.
You know, I was having a discussion with a complete stranger one time. I was actually on a hike, and I met this dude out on a hike, and we just got to talking, hiking together. And it always comes up, you know, that I'm a Christian, that I'm a pastor. I mean, that's just a normal conversation. And a lot of times that opens up the door for me to witness. But sometimes whenever I say that I'm a Christian or a pastor, it shuts it down for various reasons. And then I start getting attacked because I'm a pastor. It's very common. Mm-hmm. But with this particular guy, it came up and it went to the Muslim faith. We got off on that rabbit hole. You know, we're just hiking and, you know, we're talking about whatever. And he basically was challenging the idea that Muslims are not aggressive, that Muslims is a peace religion and all that kind of stuff. That was his claim. Obviously, I totally disagree. And I told this man, I said, go to Saudi Arabia, go to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and I want you to go there and start a church. And I want you to tell me how that works out for you. Because, like he just read, it is illegal to start a church in Saudi Arabia.
Yep, prohibited from praying and worshiping in public and constructing church buildings. Can't do it in Saudi Arabia. All right, the next one is Nigeria. Obviously, most of us have heard a lot of the news recently about Nigeria, but it's not just recent. These numbers and things actually go back to 2024 and previous. Can't quite get 2025's yet because it's still January and they're still compiling. But in Nigeria, Islamic extremists and Fulani, is that how you say that?
Sure.
Yeah. Sounds good. Militants regularly brutally attack Christian communities throughout northern Nigeria, and we're going to dive into that a little bit more here in a minute. Iran, obviously we know what's going on in Iran right now, but under the country's oppressive Islamic rule, Christians are often imprisoned and charged as enemies of the state. Check the wording there, enemies of the government, of the state. Afghanistan, the Taliban enforces an extremist interpretation of Sharia law, punishing those who share or accept the gospel with death. Obviously, we've heard stories of brutal ways of how they will kill Christians and all types of evil there. Russia. Obviously, we know, if you know anything about American history, Russia has always kind of been a a thorn in our side, but the government oppresses and punishes churches that don't align with its agenda. So you have the state leading, and there are Islamic or Muslim cells within Russia as well. China, communist authorities regularly close church buildings, imprison pastors, and monitor believers. That's where you have the huge underground church because it's so persecuted. North Korea, Christians languish in prisons or labor camps where they are tortured, raped, and killed. India, you have Hindu nationalist groups in India, such as the RSS, are pushing for India to be entirely a Hindu nation. Their influence reaches all the way to the prime minister. And so there are bunches of these countries, like Pastor Jason said, and it's interesting to look at the geography of this. And it makes me think back to when Abraham took things into his own hands and we had Ishmael. And I believe it says that you'll deal with this for many years. And here we are, and that's the stem of that is the Islamic faith and all of that as well. So,
and so again, it's easy to make an observation. Let's do communism as an example. Russia, China, North Korea, to name a few. I mean, there's others, Vietnam, all of them.
Yeah.
Any communist country, any socialist country like that is going to be heavily persecuting religion. And the reason is because the founder of the communist faith, the communist philosophy, was an atheist person. So he didn't believe in God. He believed in the state. He thought that believing in God was weakness, and he felt like it would weaken a country or weaken a people if they put their faith in a God instead of putting it in the state. So one of the reasons why I would never vote for a communist or a socialist candidate, whether it's in America or around the world, is because the fundamental aspect of communism flows out of atheism, and there's always going to be a conflict between a communist and a socialist and a Christian. Is always going to happen. Yep. The second thing that you saw very evident there is the influence of the Muslim faith persecuting the Christians. And again, this isn't a political thing. That's the reason I would never vote for a Muslim person to be the mayor, to be a governor, or to be a representative of me in any capacity, and why I would never support the Muslim faith taking root, because it always leads to destruction. You can go and look at the places where Islam is firmly established, and it always leads to the same outcome. It would be the same with communism. It always leads to the same outcome. And to think that it's not going to lead there is being disingenuous, ignorant, or you are
false sense of reality.
Yeah, you're being misleading on purpose. On purpose. And so again, these things it's not a political thing per se, but it is just common sense that you really need to wake up and understand that these entities are not friends of the gospel. We want to convert them, and we want them to follow Jesus, and that is our goal. And that was Paul's goal. Paul wanted to go stand before the emperor of Rome and preach the gospel to him in order for them to convert. He tried to convert governors. He tried to convert leaders in the city. Yep. That's what he tried to do. He tried to convert everybody, and that's our goal as well. Yep. So with that being said, we're going to move forward now and kind of dive in to 3 of the top 5 deadliest countries for Christians were actually in Africa, which remains the epicenter of systematic violence against them because of groups that are affiliated with the Islamic State. Pick it up from there, Brother Jason.
Yeah, noting that religious violence is driven for different reasons depending on the country. The report found that all of them share the presence of the Islamic State, weak state protection, and a lack of accountability for perpetrators. And so, like I mentioned earlier, Nigeria. So let's kind of start with Nigeria. Nigeria emerged as the deadliest country with 590 documented killings. So that's, like Pastor Jason said earlier, that's not even the ones that we can confirm. But though the report noted that the documented figures do not necessarily reflect the full scale of the violence in the African nation, where religious identity is often underreported, many regions are inaccessible, and many incidents cannot be independently verified. So I would say that's a very low number.
It is.
While the violence spilling into Nigeria's Middle Belt region from extremist groups in the north is multifaceted and also afflicts Muslims, field investigators with Global Christian Relief who visited the country found repeated coordinated attacks on Christian populations in which pastors and churches were deliberately targeted, and survivors reported being attacked explicitly because of their faith, according to the report. The investigators discerned that the cumulative impact on Christian communities in Nigeria through targeted attacks on leaders, places of worship, and homes reflects sustained persecution rather than isolated criminal activity. So it's there. It doesn't go away. It's not just a bunch of crooks and criminals. It's persecution on the church.
It would be the same as when Nazi Germany used the levers of the state and of government to liquidate the Jews. They called it the Jewish solution to the Jewish problem. And they used railroads. They used paid state officials in order to liquidate and kill a Jewish population. That is what the Islamic the Islamic terror group is doing in these northern African countries. They are liquidating the Christians in the same way that Nazi Germany liquidated the Jews, on the same scale.
Yeah, and this goes into some specifics from a Nigerian pastor. Listen to this. The report cited the Reverend Yakubu Muton, a Nigerian pastor who described the night that the Fulani militants murdered 9 people in his rectory. I guess that's home. I don't know what that word means. While his wife hid in the bathroom and he hid with his goats. We were hearing their noise, hearing their cries before they killed them, and they killed them. They cut them to pieces. They burned them, he said. Man. So you want me to keep going? So after Nigeria, you have the Democratic Republic of the Congo. You have Ethiopia. They follow close behind Nigeria. Once again, these are guesses, but with 447 and 177 killings, respectively. Russia, which also has Islamic State affiliated cells, with the 4th deadliest, with 167 killings. You have Mozambique, which continues to suffer an ongoing insurgency from Islamic State. Mozambique militants was 5th with 94 killings. It was also the country where the most Christians were forced to flee because of their faith, with, listen to this, 13,298 verified incidents of displacement. So not only the murder of Christians, but the running out of Christians of the country.
So, and it's not just there. Obviously, that is where most of it is taking place. But let's skip down to Mexico, because one of the things that we don't recognize is the persecution that's taking place to Christians in Mexico. And now this isn't because of a communist government that is obviously a large portion of the world. This isn't because of Muslims, though that is a large portion of the world. But this is for a different reason. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So Mexico led in the number of abductions and assaults against Christians in the world, with 376 verified incidents, though such violence was typically related to criminal governance rather than religious ideology. The drug cartels that wield power in Mexico reportedly target Christian pastors, lay leaders, and youth workers because their efforts at drug prevention and community organizing are seen as a threat against cartel control.
So every time the gospel is preached, the communist government looks at that as a threat to their power.
Yep.
Every time the gospel is preached, the Muslims look at that sermon as a threat to their power. Every time the gospel is preached in Mexico to get off drugs, that is looked as a threat to their power. And because it is threatening their power, their money, the love of money is the root of all evil. Because it threatens their money, then they attack the entity that appears to be subverting their control over whatever territory that they have. It's a very interesting fact. So we're going to close it out by acknowledging, again, this isn't a political statement, but acknowledging the political realities of this. So you had J.D. Vance actually give a speech in Europe where he rebuked the European leaders for suppressing free speech and discriminating against Christians in Europe. Oftentimes we don't look at Europe as a place of great persecution, but it is creeping in woke ideology. For example, it is illegal to pray silently outside of a abortion clinic. So if you were standing by a pole, just standing there, not saying anything, not doing anything, and someone walked up to you and said, "What are you doing?" "I'm praying in my mind," you could be arrested and thrown in jail because of that. Persecution in that manner because of the woke agenda. So what we see is the way we interact in our political life matters. The way we interact in our walk with God every single day matters. It all matters, and oftentimes we don't see the reality of what we have sown until it's too late. And that's certainly taking place in Europe right now. So with that being said, there's a lot of work that has to be done. Yep. We need more Pauls. We need more Timothys. We need more workers of the gospel. We need more Christians who feel connected to missions, who feels connected to the spread of the gospel locally and abroad. And we need to recognize there are Alexander the coppersmiths out there who opposes the work of God, but we must remain faithful to our calling, to whatever the Lord has asked us to do, to remain faithful. And we must be unified as a body of Christ in order to face the challenges that we face today, not only around the world, but even in our own country. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this has been informational to you. I hope it encourages you and inspires you to join this struggle, join this fight of spreading the gospel here locally and around the world. Thank you, Brother Jason, for joining us. Like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you next Tuesday right here at 8:30. God bless.